So, Dune is one of those books that I think every nerd has an opinion on, including me, I guess. So, in honor of the new movie, I am going to share with you my experience reading Dune for the first time. It was alright. You see, the thing is, Dune has an amazing premise. I love this strange semi-medieval culture that that has entered the science fiction universe, right? And it has all these weird space witches and human computers. I eat that stuff up. It's the kind of science fiction I can get behind, which is to say it's not really science fiction at all. It's science fantasy. It's a fantasy world with spaceships. At least that's how it looks from the surface. Obviously, Dune uh, it maintains that very science fiction mindset of a very blatant commentary on real world problems and metaphors for things that have real world uh, real world counterparts. It's usually about as subtle as a thrown battle axe in most instances of sci-fi, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, the commentary that the author Frank Herbert brings forward is on the danger of charismatic leaders, as well as a warning against fanaticism and fear that where power is concerned and politics, that rarely do good things come to the deserving. See, Dune follows Paul Atreides of House Atreides, who happens to be the chosen one, the Kwisatz Haderach, who is capable of seeing the past and the future and scrying the tides of fate, among other things. Sort of think Bran Stark, I guess, but on drugs, which, come to think of it, is just Bran Stark, actually. So, never mind. Bran was probably inspired by Paul, but I digress. Paul is our hero, only he isn't the hero. He's kind of a jerk, or at least he becomes a jerk as a result of the various tragedies and trauma that occurs to him throughout the novel. His family is a powerful great house, a rising star in the galactic empire, and the emperor doesn't like that. He doesn't like to share power or share the love of the people. So he hatches a scheme to let the enemies of House Atreides, the Boltons, sorry, I mean the Harkonnens, uh, they basically invade and slaughter the Atreides. They usurp them on the world of Arrakis, and it basically places the Harkonnens in power and under the Emperor's thumb. It's really quite the clever plan. But Paul's father is killed, and Paul himself is forced to go on the run with his mother, the space witch Lady Jessica. They hide out with the local sand people, the blue-eyed Fremen, who begin worshiping Paul as a god by the end of things. But this isn't some like YA fantasy where the hero is a hero and no, don't question their questionable motives. No, Paul is not a white savior like Daenerys Targaryen, nor is he a special snowflake Jedi Knight. No, Paul gets caught up in his own religious fervor, and he can see the future, and so a younger, more innocent Paul is able to see the day when he becomes this monster. He leads a jihad against all of his enemies and basically becomes a bloodthirsty tyrant. So he does try to avoid that, but in so doing, he sort of loses track of himself. He becomes dispassionate and cold. And while the Harkonnens are so much worse than the Atreides and the Fremen. No one really comes out particularly good natured in the novel. Paul's father seems to be a genuinely good guy, but he says himself that his family has one of the best propaganda machines in the galaxy. He keeps in his service spy masters and cutthroats like Gurney Halleck and Thufir Hawat, who, while they're far from downright villainous, they are also somewhat crude and vengeful. They're far from the noble knights of the pure good fantasy house, right? The only one who seems to fit that mold is Duncan Idaho, the sword master, who, we might just think that way about him because, spoiler alert, he dies really quickly. So we don't have enough time to learn about his trauma, I'm guessing. Dune is it's a fascinating story, really, and complicated. And it has inspired so many great works of fiction. Right? If you're looking for the Galactic Empire, it's probably inspired by Dune. If you're looking for the bloodlines of people who can see the past and future, that's probably Dune too. And an evil, overweight duke or baron or count who's trying to accrue power for his great house, that, unfortunately, is also Dune. That said, Baron Harkonnen is actually a damn good villain. He is quite fascinating and perhaps one of the best written characters in the novel. Manipulative and scheming and just villainous to the core. He's almost as good a villain as his nephew Phaedra, who in many ways is the anti-Paul. He's brave and passionate and a creature focused on the here and now. Fade is a master manipulator as well as a swordsman, and for a while there he's almost sympathetic. I think it is the influence of the sinful Baron that actually corrupts Fade. Else he would be the main character, in my opinion. He'd be the hero. Uh, and also, he was played by Sting in the original David Lynch movie, which, yeah, take that new movie. Uh, Dune is inspiring, and I'm afraid to say my experience reading it was actually not all that great. I found Frank Herbert's writing to be somewhat dry and without heart, in my opinion. I'm not ashamed to say it. It's my own personal problem, really. And while I don't think every story should have ridiculously purple prose, uh, I don't think adding a bit of flavor here and there is to be shunned. So I guess if you're a big fan of like Tolkien's writing or George R. R. Martin's, you might I might suggest watching one of the movies instead, right? Like Dune, it it will eat a part of your soul if you're not prepared for that specific style. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but it's not for me. But I will remember the story, and I'm sure it will be picked apart and reassembled for years to come. Paul will sometimes be the hero, Paul will sometimes be the villain, and sometimes it'll be set in a fantasy world. Sometimes it'll be set in Westeros or in a galaxy far, far away. But only one iteration of Dune will have Sting in it, and that's a fact. Well, now I've shared my thoughts and feelings about Dune. A fascinating story, really, if the book itself didn't exactly capture the magic for me. Uh, I guess like and subscribe if you like hearing about space wizards and hearing me tell the honest truth about what I think about popular books and movies and shows and such. And Yeah. Hit the bell icon too while you're at it. It really helps me out. So, yeah. Bye.